So, does washing dishes count? If we are mindful while we do it? That was the question posed by a group of first year seminarians when they got an assignment to engage in a spiritual practice on a regular basis. It was we, because I was one of the people in the group. We were desperately trying to figure out how to fit this assignment into our already full lives. It was our first semester at divinity school, and our minds were reeling with our lives packed, filled with kids and pets, with jobs and relationships, with chores, and of course, with all the homework from all the other classes we were taking. It was how were we supposed to fit this into? In his blog post on the subject of what makes an effective congregation, the Reverend Dr. Arvid Straube recommends that congregations attend to 4 areas of religious practice. And I like to think of these as locations. So the first location is the cushion. Reverend Straube references a meditation cushion to symbolize a personal spiritual practice. Of course, it doesn't have to be an actual cushion. For some people, it's a yoga mat or a prayer rug, or simply a comfortable chair with a drawing journal. Ideally, this activity would be something we engage in daily, setting time aside for regular prayer, meditation, and or reflection. It doesn't have to be a really long time each day. Even just 5 to 10 minutes dedicated to focus on a sacred reading, journaling, or a body spirit practice, that can be, as Reverend Straube notes, indispensable for integrating or reflecting on one's life experiences and growing into a whole human being. This is the location we seminarians were fretting about, and perhaps we were not alone. Has anyone here tried a spiritual practice or rejected one or done both at different times in their lives? Yes, indeed, me too. Our congregations can encourage us to engage in such explorations, and they can help us find the right cushion for us by offering different opportunities to explore. I know of Unitarian Universalist congregations that have offered classes on such traditions as Japanese crane meditation, centering prayer, and Buddhist insight meditation. Other congregations have offered yoga classes, sacred journaling, or ecstatic dance. By exploring spiritual practices in these groups, congregants are encouraged to integrate these disciplines into their daily routine back at home. Now, the second location is the living room. Of course, this location, like the cushion, need not be a literal living room, but imagine, if you will, a comfortable, inviting room where we might gather for face-to-face and heart-to-heart conversation with a small group of 8 to 12 spiritual friends. In this framework, these groups meet regularly, maybe about 1 time a month, so as to provide an environment in which people can explore deeply together and nurture spiritual, trusting relationships with one another. Now, in these 90 minutes or so of structured living room time, people explore huge questions that life presents. Questions like, what is my life purpose? Or, how am I feeling called to serve? Or, what does it mean that I have to die? And what is the legacy that I will leave behind? And how can I love well today? When we are engaging in such big questions, theological themes are bound to be woven into the conversations. Themes like forgiveness, compassion, and liberation. Many Unitarian Universalist congregations attend to the living room location by organizing people into small groups. At the church where I currently serve in that exurb of Milwaukee, we call them soul matters, small groups. But at other congregations, I've heard them called chalice circles or covenant groups or home church. In March, people at the congregation where I serve are exploring the theme of the path of vulnerability. And I think that's the theme here as well, correct? So during these monthly gatherings, people are listening deeply, bearing witness to each other's life journeys, and simply getting to know one another on a deeper level. Not surprisingly, the friends we make in these small groups are sometimes the people who are the first to provide support and meals for us when we are experiencing hardship or illness or loss. Now, the third location is the sanctuary. The sanctuary is a location for worship service, or sometimes called corporate worship. You recognize that group of folks in that picture? From the website, I was able to grab a picture of this here sanctuary. And even though we're not all in the sanctuary, we have some folks on Zoom, we are all part of this worship experience. By coming together weekly to focus on what is of worth or worthship, this spiritual community is made stronger. We use music, art, and spoken word to engage in all of our senses during our time as an intentional gathered community. Across the continent, Unitarian Universalists are gathering in multi-platform sanctuaries to explore and interpret the symbols and stories of those who came before us, and to commit once again to creating a world for those who will follow. Sometimes in the sanctuary, we tell stories about our origins as Universalists, as Unitarians, or as Unitarian Universalists who merged in 1961 to become one denomination. Sometimes in the sanctuary, we explore symbols of our shared faith, such as the historical use of the flaming chalice, or what it means to us as Unitarian Universalists today. Sometimes in the sanctuary, we sing songs. We bring the beloved community into being, breath by breath and note by note. As it has been done for generations, weekly worship as a congregation reminds us of our highest ideals and calls us into our best selves, both as individuals and as a community. In the sanctuary, we focus our collective attention on a wider good. Now, the fourth and final location is the street. As a location for religious practice, the street might bring to mind images of protests and rallies and marches, filled with signs and chants and calls to action. Reverend Straube broadens this notion, however. He considers the street any place where we are helping to heal the world. As he notes, the street is where everything that is learned on the cushion, in the living room, and in the sanctuary is brought to bear to help heal the world in service and in witness. Any place where we might help heal the world is a pretty large location. Perhaps you have a street of a workplace or a classroom or a grocery store. It might be virtual spaces like social media platforms or interactions over email. Maybe it's in the voting booth or the hospital room or the state capitol building. Basically, wherever you show up, if you show up by embodying loving kindness and compassion, if you show up advocating for justice in our systems and bearing witness to the wrongs that must be righted, if you show up bringing your Unitarian Universalist values to life, then you are in the street. Unlike the 3 previous locations, there's not a recommended frequency for how often we should take it to the streets. That frequency is really going to depend on the lives of each one of you and the various opportunities that present themselves. So those are the 4 locations. And given the monthly theme of the path of vulnerability, we get to ask the question, what might these locations for religious practice invite us into leaning into? And before we consider those invitations, let's just make sure we understand what we're talking about when we say vulnerability. So just a quick poll here in the room. How many of you like being vulnerable? Raise your hand. There's no one. There's no one raising their hand in the sanctuary. I don't know what the Zoom room is doing. Can you tell, Ken? I don't know. Any hands being raised there? Well, what if I rephrased the question and asked the question like this? How many of you desire to be known for who you truly are? Yeah. We have a deep desire to be known for who we truly are. And 20th century theologian Howard Thurman explains that we humans have this deep desire to be acknowledged and understood as our genuine, authentic selves. Reverend Thurman gets at vulnerability in this way when he writes, I think that if you were stripped to whatever there is in you that is literal and irreducible, and you tried to answer the question, what is the thing that you desire most in life? The answer may be something like this. I want to feel that I am thoroughly and completely understood, so that now and then I can take my guard down and look out around me and not feel that I will be destroyed with my defenses down. I want to feel completely vulnerable, completely naked, completely exposed, and absolutely secure. That's quite a high bar, isn't it? To be vulnerable, to be completely vulnerable, naked, and exposed, and also be absolutely secure in that state of vulnerability. If that indeed is the deepest desire that we humans hold, then our Unitarian Universalist congregations, our beloved communities, seem like good places to practice learning how to be both vulnerable and secure. Indeed, today's second reading references our congregations as places to be vulnerable. The Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt states it this way: church is not a place to hide. Or put another way, an effective congregation is not a place to hide. We don't hide on the cushion. We don't hide in the living room. We don't hide in the sanctuary. We do not hide in the streets. How do we not hide? How do we practice vulnerability in these locations? Here are my thoughts and my explorations, and you can see if this feels right for you too. Vulnerability on the cushion looks like an honest and loving assessment of who we are at any given moment in life. Through journaling or art making or meditating, we lean into that discomfort of noticing what it is that is bothering us. We get to notice our monkey mind jumping around. We are invited to practice gently bringing ourselves back to the current moment, to the movement of the pen on paper, to the relationship of the colors on the canvas, to the sensation of the breath coming in and going out of the body. Vulnerability in the living room looks like being honest and loving with the beloved friends surrounding us. Through deep sharing and deep listening, we lean into the discomfort of revealing sides of ourselves we don't typically have time or space to disclose. We get to notice our tendency to want to hide ourselves, sometimes behind the facade of wanting to fix other people's problems. We are invited in the living room to practice sitting in the discomfort of our own messy lives, knowing that the sacred act of bearing witness to one another is both a comfort and a support. Vulnerability in the sanctuary looks like an honest and loving exploration of Unitarian Universalism as a faith tradition which calls us to return again and again to the essential work of justice and liberation for all. Through communal singing, the telling of wisdom stories, the rituals of sharing, we lean into the discomfort of being reminded that though we are loved exactly as we are also being called into our better selves. We get to notice when we critique the spiritual gifts being offered in worship. We are invited to practice releasing the grip of our own individual wants and needs in service to a larger communal good, complete with ideals that no single one of us can complete on our own. Vulnerability in the streets looks like an honest and loving engagement of the work of the world, as ongoing as it is. Through daily interaction with strangers, letters to the editor, and prayer vigils and many other places, we lean into the discomfort of showing up, sometimes in the face of open conflict. We show up with our human bodies, our human hearts, our human convictions. We get to notice when we turn too quickly back to our fears of not being enough, of not having enough, of not doing enough. We are invited to practice bringing our authentic selves wherever and however we can as we help to heal our bruised and broken world. Through these locations, we practice being simultaneously vulnerable and secure. Through such vulnerability and security, we become authentically known to ourselves and to those around us. Through our practices of showing up again and again for ourselves and each other, we are known authentically in all of our quirky, fabulous, lovable imperfections. Friends, make no bones about it. Our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to return to this essential work of justice and liberation for all. It's in our roots, it's in our principles, it's in our values, it's in our current initiatives and calls to action. Such essential work of justice and liberation for all is long-haul work that will require our best selves. So in the weeks and the months ahead, may you continue to come together so that we all can, in the words of the Rosemary Bray McNabb, gather strength to face what we see with courage and, yes, with joy. Blessed be, and amen.